Professor Frank Furedi is here, author and sociologist, of course. He's got a great piece in the Daily Mail today, all about how he and his family escaped from the wilds of Hungary back in the day when the Russians piled into Budapest in 1956. And precisely because of that, he knows all about why immigration is a very important thing, and he knows why the immigration policy of this government right now is getting it completely and utterly wrong. Frank, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Mike.
So, it's absolutely right. I was talking about this earlier in the week because I was watching, by coincidence, that Wham documentary on Netflix, which is very good, by the way, all about George Michael, who was known as Yog when he was a youngster because he was brought up in a Greek Cypriot household, and his father was a very, what I would regard as a typical sort of North London Greek Cypriot, probably Tottenham supporter like yourself, who came to this country probably in the 50s and literally worked his backside off, you know, built up a business and continually worked all the time, all the hours that God sent to raise his family, to be a good father, and all, you know, all of those great sort of qualities that we used to think of as qualities in the olden days. And I imagine your family was probably the same. People came to this country for a better life, but they were willing to work for that better life.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things is when you arrive in a country that's allowed you to be in there and has been kind to you, you kind of try to repay that by doing your best to work hard to become a citizen that is making a contribution to society.
Right.
And for that reason, as I explained in that article, I got no problems with immigrants. They often make an incredible contribution to the society they come to. They often are self-selected. They're very adventurous, risk-takers. And we can see that in Britain today, that some immigrant communities have done really, really well. What I'm really worried about is that we're eroding the distinction between legal immigrants, legal migrants, and illegal ones. And these days, when you use the word illegal, you often get accused of being mean and even racist, that somehow there is no such thing as an illegal migrant. And we forget the fact that illegal migration constitutes a crime against a society. It constitutes a breach of that society's security. It basically means that the government of that society loses control over its borders.
Right.
And these big issues are very rarely discussed, and certainly the House of Lords, which is one of the most sanctimonious institutions in the world, whenever they discuss illegal migration, they kind of huff and puff and pretend it doesn't really exist. And that instead the moral thing is to do whatever we can to let people in, no matter how they came, no matter what their intentions are, all the while forgetting that the really moral thing that a society can do is to take its own border seriously.
Yeah. Well, you can't really be a nation if you can't control who comes into the country and who goes out of the country, because I refuse to believe that actually the Home Office even knows who goes out of the country. You know, we've got those net migration statistics, which are supposedly the legal ones, where we saw 1.2 million people coming in 2022 with either sort of work visas or student visas. But nobody really knows what happens to them after the visa runs out.
Yeah, and I think the Home Office should be rebranded as the Home Working Office because I get the impression that they're spending a lot of time in their digital bedrooms playing various kinds of games. And when it comes to enforcing the nation's security, when it comes to dealing with the issue of immigration, they seem to have a very hands-off policy where they're really reluctant to make hard decisions. And in that sense, their paralysis is mirrored by the political class, who also is totally reluctant and has done absolutely nothing to keep its promises about securing our borders.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely right. And in times when families like your own moved into Britain, it was also a very different country. You know, it was pretty monocultural. It was much less crowded than it is now. And there were opportunities for people. I mean, I, funnily enough, used to work in a Hungarian bakery as a teenager. And so I knew a lot of Hungarians who had come since '56, and many of them with literally nothing, running out of the country with literally the clothes they were wearing. Some of them went into refugee camps in the north of England and Scotland. But they had opportunities. They could then make something of their lives. And what I worry about is that some of the people coming now, particularly those coming illegally, can only really end up in the black economy. They can't end up doing proper jobs. Many of them don't speak very good English. We see many of them driving around on scooters delivering food to people. But, I mean, that's about it.
Well, I think there might be jobs around, because one of the tragedies of present-day British society is that a lot of people simply do not want to work. And ever since COVID in particular, when a lot of the elderly people in the labor market decided to opt out and take a long-term retirement, we do have a lot of shortages here and there. So there are jobs available. I think the problem is that very often people, even migrants that come in here, don't necessarily want to do those jobs. I mean, there are honourable exceptions to this.
No, but also, are these people going to be able to get jobs? Because they do come here and they live in a sort of transitory hotel state for a couple of years. You remember those guys in Pimlico, when Richard Tice went to speak to them, he said, "Where have you been?" "Oh, we've been in a hotel in Essex." "How long for?" 2 years. You know, if some of those people went up to even a coffee shop or maybe a fast food joint and said, "Have you got any jobs?" they might be turned away just because, you know, they don't look the part.
Yeah, I mean, there are all kinds of difficulties now, which have got to do with the lack of control on the part of our society, that we just don't know how to handle what to do with the people coming in. There's also the problem that very often the new arrivals, who are principally young men, are very easily drawn into the black economy that you've suggested. And if you go to some places in England, you'll find that in some of these smaller towns, you have a situation where there's a large influx of young men that have come in there, and they simply spend most of their times hanging out and not really getting stuck in, and certainly not getting involved in the labor market.
Well, that's the thing, and the difficulty with the policy that this government has got is that they keep pretending, "Oh, well, don't worry, everything will be fine once we process all of these people." Well, there's 180,000 people that need processing, which is going to take probably about 20 years to do. And what happens, as I always ask this question to politicians as well, what happens when you process them and they don't qualify for asylum? You can't send them away, so what do you do with them?
Well, this is a kind of a charade where basically the whole process of processing has an inevitable end, which is that everybody gets to stay here because there is no will to turn people away. And even if people are found not to be eligible for an asylum, people just kind of look at their shoelaces, they kind of pretend that the problem is going to go away sooner rather than later, and the individuals get to stay here. So we now have a situation where there's this fatalistic attitude towards illegal migration. And that more or less means that illegal migration has become a kind of semi-legal form of migration, because our society cannot make that clear distinction between legal and illegal.
So do you have any hope that they will eventually fix this problem? Because I don't see it ending. And I don't see it ending well either, because we saw what happened in Llanelli this week, where there was a local protest by people that lived in that part of town, where the hotel was taken over for being filled up with migrants. I think we're going to see more of that, more sort of civil unrest, and it could turn a bit ugly.
Well, I think you're right that at the moment, neither of the main parties are prepared to do anything serious to deal with the problem. They've got a very dishonest orientation towards immigration, where they make all kinds of promises that they know that they have no intention of keeping. They have no intention of taking this question as seriously as it should. In addition to that, you have a growing percentage of the employer class who are arguing that the way you solve the economic problems facing Britain is by getting even more migrants in, because we haven't got the people with the skills, we haven't got enough people in the NHS and all the other areas of the public sector. So I think that we're in for a continuous flow of people into this country in a way that isn't really organized properly, in a way that's conducted semi-dishonestly, because there is a situation where nobody wants to confront the British people with the real situation, which is that we're not in control. We are not able to do anything about this problem, and you're going to have to pay the price for our incompetence.
Yeah.